Hello there, fellow truth seekers. This is Doug coming to you again on this here Shabbat. I hope you folks had a good week. I don't know why this camera does this, but it makes me look like I'm looking off to the side. I hope y'all had a good week and we're blessed. We're definitely in perilous times, troubling times with all the stuff that's going on. And as I've talked about before, this is all stuff that's prophesied to come to pass. Um, Christ in Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, and in some of the scriptures I want to read today. And the thing I want to kind of talk about is the rise of, I don't know if you'd say it's necessarily the Antichrist. I think the Antichrist is a religious figure, but you have to understand that back during the time of uh, Constantine and on down, it was the Pope of Rome. The you know the Pope would be the one who would crown the emperor, and then the emperor would enforce the religious system on the rest of the world, the Roman world at that time. And of course, Constantine was the one where there was this marriage. That's when the marriage between the religious system and the political military system began. Um, he was in power from like I think 323 to 320 something to 363, and or his dynasty or whatever. And he's the one that implemented Sunday worship, and enforced it, made it a law, a decree. And he also introduced or Christianized pagan religious holidays. And so from then on, it was popes that pretty much would be the ones who would enforce this religious, political, military system, would enforce the religious edicts. And of course, they made it a law you had to worship on Sunday, which is that is the mark of the beast. I've talked about that before. That people think it's a chip in the hand or in your forehead or something. No, it's Sunday worship that is the mark of the beast. But it will be enforced by a chip and a mark, or a chip in the hand or in the forehead, because you won't be able to buy or sell without it. And so that's how that will be the enforcement mechanism, but that will not be what the actual mark of the beast is. The mark is when you worship on the false Sabbath. And because I've talked about it before, where you go back and you read about the Sabbath being established, and which it was established at the beginning, but whenever it was codified into the law that Moses received, he was told that this is a sign and a seal upon you forever. If you keep this, then this is my seal on you. And so, and he told them to put a thing between their eyes, on their forehead and on their wrist or their hand. They call them phylacteries. They were a little box that had the Ten Commandments in it, and or a thing that went around their wrist that had them written on it. And so there's the forehead symbolism and the hand symbolism. It is what you think and what you do with your hands, what work. that's the symbolism of it. And of course, what I'm kind of wanting to get to here is about, and I've talked about this in a couple of my mentioned it, but a certain person that is running for political office, you really have to take a look at what's going on around this person. And I'm speaking of Donald Trump. Okay. And the reason I'm doing this is because I don't want you to be deceived. I don't want anybody to be deceived. Because, in Matthew 24, and I'm going to read from Matthew 24, the reason I use Matthew 24 as much as I do is because this really pertains to our time. This is Christ is his disciples. If you listen to what he said here, it says, and he sat upon the Mount of Olives. The disciples came unto him privately, saying, tell us, when shall these things be? Because he had told them that no stone would be left standing of the temple complex and all that there in Jerusalem, or the walls or anything else. And they said, well, tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? And I have to repeat this because I want people to really have to, I want you to understand about prophecy. Prophecy, a lot of times, is dual meaning. It is a prophecy for the time that is being given in. And it is a prophecy for a future time, for the latter days. Okay? And he says, take heed that no man deceive you. No man deceive you. For many shall come in my name, saying, I'm Christ. In other words, these people will come in his name, saying that he is Christ. That Yahushua is Christ. And shall deceive many. All right? And of course, the rest of you should hear wars and rumors of wars. Okay, well, these things did happen back then. They were false Christs back then too. Or false teachers. People, Paul, went into it extensively in his epistles and all about these people that were teaching a different Christ than the one that he had told them. And they were preaching a different gospel. Because he told them, he says, if anyone preaches unto you a gospel other than that which I have delivered unto you, let them be an anathema, because, or accursed, because they're teaching contrary to what the Messiah taught the disciples. So we got to be aware of these, and the hallmark of these antichrist, or because there's been many antichrists, because Paul said the spirit of antichrist is already at work even now. John did, in the epistles of John, he says the spirit of antichrist is already at work in the world. So it's not something that's just for the latter days. It's been going on all throughout the time since Christ. This spirit that just moves from one entity, moves from one person to another, and and he says, that they say that Christ does not come in the flesh. In other words, not talking about his first appearing and being, killed and resurrected. No, it's talking about coming into us and indwelling in us. Because he says he dwells in us, indwells us. Because it's him that is the one that is the author and finisher of our belief, and will guide our steps if we allow him to. If we're obedient, then then he will sanctify us, and he does that, by indwelling us and through his ruach, the Holy Spirit. You know, he will guide our steps and keep us on the straight and narrow path. But you know, it comes down to obedience. We got to be obedient whenever something in our conscience tells us we're doing something. Because Paul, he told us, if your conscience doesn't bother you about something, then it's okay. It's whenever your conscience, you have to listen to your conscience. If your conscience is telling you not to do something, then don't do it. Because that is the Spirit of Christ in us that is telling us, what's right and what's wrong. And we have to listen to that. And but you got to be able to separate out the voices, because there's the fallen ones are going to be trying to put stuff in your mind. But the Father said He would write His laws in our conscience and on our heart, and so if we listen to that voice, that because you can question those voices in your head, the ones that will be trying to lead you astray. But then you have your own voice, your own voice that's in your head. You gotta push that away too. And let your mind be under the control of the Ruach, of the Holy Spirit, because we have to be one mind with Him. Paul said, "Let that mind which was in Christ also be in you." So if you let that mind be in control, then you're gonna hear the voice of truth that's gonna lead you to truth. Because these other your own voice and your own mental voice and them voices of those fallen ones that are going to be trying to corrupt you. If you don't let the mind of Christ be in you, these other voices are going to kind of they're going to get control, one or the other, your own or these voices from outside. These evil voices. And it's not like somebody talking to you. I mean, it can be, it can get to a point where if you're demonically possessed or something like that, or that you have demonic entities hanging around you, that they can really be impressing into your mind to the point where you actually literally are hearing them, physically hearing them. Because if you look at these people like Son of Sam and these other serial killers and people like that, a lot of times they say there's a voice was telling them to do this. And of course a lot of times they believed it was God telling them to do it, but it wasn't. Because God don't tell people to do that kind of stuff. The way that He normally, most of the time, the way He speaks to us is through His Word. Yes, but the Ruach, the Holy Spirit, is here as our conscience. To speak to us, to our conscience, and to steer us away from going off of the straight and narrow path into the broad path. And so we have to listen to it, and and He'll speak to us too through this. If we listen to if we read this word here while we're reading it, He will be letting us know whether what we're thinking about it is correct or not. He will lead us to the truth of it. But we've got to want to know that truth, for one, and He will lead us to it. But all these things. So there's going to be people, and they have been all along, rising up that they claim that He's Christ, but they are deceivers. Because He says, "Many shall come. Take heed, no man deceive you, for many shall come in my name." They're coming in Christ's name, saying that He is Christ, and shall deceive many. It's just like there in Revelation chapter 13, the second beast that has the horns like a lamb, but, speaks like a dragon. They got the appearance of being Christ-like or godly, but they speak with the words of the dragon. And so we have to know that. We have to understand that. And, because Christ, here also he tells us, he says, I'm going to look here in Mark 13. Mark 13, 19. Let's see if I'm in 13. Okay, there we go. It says, and then if any man shall say to you, lo, here is Christ, or lo, he is there, believe him not, for false Christ and false prophets shall rise, and shall show signs and wonders to seduce, if it were possible, even the elect. But take ye heed, behold, I have foretold you all things. So, he's telling us. He's reminding them, I've told you all things. I've foretold you that this is going to happen. That these, and that they would deceive even the elect people if it's were possible. Because but he's telling them to take heed, because I have foretold you how to see them, how to spot them. Because they're going to come in my name. They're not going to be obvious deceivers. Some of them are deceived themselves. They really think that they're doing what's right. But they're deceived too. But some, they know exactly what they are doing, and they're doing it deliberately. And of course, some of them would be people like, Kenneth Copeland, Kenneth Hagin, all that bunch. These prosperity gospel preachers, and all that stuff. And there's nothing in Scripture that really backs any of that up. There's nowhere in there where it says that, he's going to, he says that he hoped that, his wish for us is to prosper in all things, even as our soul prospereth. But he told us explicitly, he said, don't lay up your treasures here on the earth, where rust and moth do corrupt and thieves seek to break in and steal, but lay up your treasures in heaven, for where your treasure is, your heart will be also. So, if you get they want you to focus on the things of the world is what they're wanting you to do. That's worldly. And so they want, and that's why, I brought up Trump. If you look at his past, you look at, his heritage. Again, I mentioned this. He is German-Scottish. Okay, and it's pretty well, I believe, established that the people that are known as the Scottish people today are from the tribe of Dan. All right, and the tribe of Dan, their symbol was the serpent. And if you look where it talks about the seal being placed on God's people during the tribulation, Dan is not mentioned. Dan's not mentioned in there. Cats are gonna set up there if you want to be over here. But he's also German or Assyrian, and there's people that truly believe that the Antichrist or whatever, or the beast, will arise out of the tribe of Dan. Now I can't with 100% certainty say that, but I know it talks about the Assyrian being the rod of correction for the house of Israel, not only back there in 739 BC, whenever the Assyrians, I think it was Sennacherib, that came in there and took over the house of Israel and took them into captivity, and they never went back. Well, he tells us that Assyria, my rod of correction for the house of Israel. And it's not just back then, it's talking about all time, until all things come to their final conclusion. And I think that that's what's going to happen is that you're going to have this person is going to rise up, and he's going to be crowned by the Pope as the Holy Roman Emperor. Just like back, when Constantine was there, he was the Holy Roman Emperor, and all emperors after that were. And they were to enforce the religious system's doctrine, Sunday worship, these pagan holidays. And what you got to understand is that one of the things that ended up happening was because they had to, every year, the calendar changed to accommodate these holidays so that they would, because the days would move, the Christmas Day, for example, would not be on the 25th, the solstice or whatever, would not be on the same day every year, because I think the winter solstice falls like on the 21st of December or 22nd, something like that, and they had when this happens, then the venerable day of the sun or the unconquerable sun, day of the sun, is on the 25th. Because during that period between there was Saturnalia, their celebration. And then on the 25th, they celebrated the unconquerable day of the sun or whatever. And so in order for all these holidays, because they moved every year on the Julian calendar, so they had to make them a new calendar, the Gregorian calendar, so that these days would fall on the same time every year. And so they done a bunch of juggling and jumbling and moving around. That's why you got all of the you got leap year, because there never was a leap year. That leap year was put in there so that whenever because it would at a certain point, it would move again, and then they would have to move the days or whatever to accommodate for it. So every fourth year they put this leap year in there to keep their calendar consistent. That's the kind of juggling around and all, but in reality, the first month of the year is March, not January. And of course, you notice that January is the name for the god Janus, the two-faced god, that had a face on the front and a face facing backwards. That's where that name, because the Hebrew people did not have names for their months. Okay, initially it was the first month, the second month, the third month, the first day, the second day, the third day. They didn't name their months until later on they began to name them. Aviv and all these names and stuff. But originally it wasn't that. It was just a number. And the way that they determined the first month of the year, because they really didn't track it the way that we do now, was based off of the phases of the moon. And whenever you had a month that had and the reason I'm bringing this up is, about the calendar and stuff, is because it says that this Antichrist, this person that, they seek to change times and traditions and laws. Well, that's the religious system, the Pope and them. They changed they changed the calendar. They changed the days of worship and the laws. I mean, they've changed the 10 Commandments to, the second commandment they've pretty much done away with, because it, is the prohibition against making idols and stuff. I mean, because they worship all kinds of idols. They got idols everywhere. And, of course, that stuff came in around the 4th century, which was after Constantine. But, they began to start bringing them in, veneration of saints and all that kind of stuff. And so, So the religious leader is the one that's going to be the one that's blaspheming and you know, and but the enforcer of it is going to be a religious or a political military person that will enforce this. That will be the emperor. And so, you know, the you know, this person is an Assyrian, but he's also of the tribe of Dan, and you know, the serpent tribe, and so which gives him his power. You know, it says that the beast, this beast is given its, the dragon gives it its power, or the serpent, or the, you know, the snake or whatever, gives it its power and authority, and so, you know, I've seen a couple of memes that were just put out about Trump. One, and it was Dilly Meme Team. Dilly Meme Team are the ones who produced them. One of them, I mean, you know, I mean, they both. You just need to go look these up and watch them and see what I'm talking about. But not only that, you know, just the demeanor of Trump through all this stuff that's been going on, it's kind of changed a little bit, and he's putting on a more of a, you know, a humble. I'm being persecuted, and you know, he's talking about, I'm the only one that can bring peace to the world. I'm the only one that can restore prosperity. I'm the only one that can, you know, clean up this deep state, the swamp. You know, and so, you know, when you listen to this rhetoric and all of this so-called persecution, now it may be that it is intentional, that they are, you know, really trying to get him or whatever, but I believe it's all kabuki theater. I believe it's all for show. Because I've talked about, you know, the left-hand side and the right-hand side being, you know, two sides of the same coin. You know, that they're all really in league together. And it's to, you know, and all of the chaos, you see, that the left-hand side is creating all this chaos. You know, I've talked about that, the Hegelian dialectic. You know, you create a crisis, you watch the reaction, and you offer a solution. And, you know, all this stuff, letting all these millions of people across the border from all around the world, you know, the economy going south, the huge national debt, the wars that are going on, you know, and it's not just in Ukraine and over in Israel. There's conflicts going on in other places too. They're just not out there in the forefront. You know, you got the potential that, you know, Venezuela is talking about attacking Guyana. You know, so, you know, you have all this chaos. And, you know, a calamity looking for a savior or a deliverer. And, you know, I mean, you know, when you think about it and you listen to this rhetoric and all that stuff, and, you know, the affiliation and association that Trump has had with the Pope, you know, I've seen some of the images of them together and stuff, and the way that they were dressed and stuff, you know, it's just kind of, you know, and then, you know, Trump, he's a Presbyterian. He went to a church there in Brooklyn, I think it was. It was Norman Vincent Peale. And he was one of these ministers about, you know, think positive, you know, the power of positive thinking and stuff like that, you know. I mean, it had no, you know, he didn't preach the gospel and, you know, preach Christ and him crucified and resurrected. No, he preached about being a positive thinker, and you can accomplish anything you want, and which is really the one of the central themes normally of all of these secret societies and the Babylonian system. I mean, it's always that, you can do it yourself, if you just think positive, you're a god. Same lie Satan told Eve, if you eat of this, you will be like a god. And that's the mentality of these people, is that they really think that. I mean, when you look there in the Capitol there in Washington, if you look up in the rotunda of the dome, the apotheosis of Washington, that means being elevated to godhood, is what apotheosis means. And so they have him up there sitting among Vulcan and Hercules and Minerva and all these other gods, and he's sitting on a throne like Zeus or something, and he's being elevated to godhood. And so, and a lot of people don't know this, that the Freemasons there in Washington, which is that's the main Freemason place in the United States, that every time that a president is inaugurated, on that same exact time while they're inaugurating the president, they do a ritual which is the resurrection of the dying God, raising him up. So at some point, when they do this ritual, that the spirit of the dying God, Osiris or Nimrod or Apollyon or Abaddon or whatever, will come up into this individual and take possession of him. And we know from reading in Revelation there, it says that he does end up taking possession of this Antichrist or this ruler, and and that's when he begins to cause people to worship. And so, and Trump, he's a Freemason. I mean, I don't know what degree he is. I'd say he's probably 33rd degree. And of course, they, once you reach the 33rd degree, they fully disclose that they're Lucifer worshipers, that they're worshiping Lucifer. And they completely remove the Bible out of it, because, whenever you first start out in Freemasonry, they make you take an oath on either the Bible or the Quran or the Vedas or something else, some other type of religious text, depending on what your religious affiliation is. They have, like, they're in their temples or whatever, they're halls, but they really are temples, that they have all these different religious books there, so that whatever your religion is, you can go over there and take your oath on that particular one. And of course, and their objective was to fully infiltrate the churches, the denominational churches, and they have. I mean, they're deacons and everything else in the church. You'd be surprised how many people that are Masonics that are in, even up in the pulpit, that are Freemasons. And so, everywhere. They're everywhere. And by infiltration, they're Illuminati. Globalists, that want a one world government. They joined in with the Freemasons. And, again, when you just look at the dynamics of what's going on, of this election cycle, how he is going greater and greater and greater, every time they do one of these, subpoenas or taking him down there and putting his mugshot out there. And I mean, if you look at that mugshot, there's a man of fierce countenance. And I'm going to show you where in Daniel, and again, Daniel's another one of them prophetic books. Silver, you need to go up here or something. You can't get over here while I'm trying to read and stuff. I love these cats and all, but they just, which is a couple of them, they're getting ready to go because we just can't keep all these cats. But Daniel is another prophetic book that is dual prophecy. It was for the time, at that particular time, but they were also, and you'll see where he says it's for the latter days. But it was, the latter times of the reign of a particular ruler, but also for our time as well. And this is Daniel chapter 8. Now, Silver, you got to stop that. Chapter 8, verse 15. And it came to pass when even I, Daniel, had seen the vision and sought for the meaning, then behold, there stood before me as the appearance of a man. And what the vision was, he had a vision of these different animals and what they represent. So what he's getting now, he's getting kind of the interpretation of the ram and the goat. The ram and the ram was the Medo-Persians, and the goat was the Greeks. But he says, and it came to pass that I had and sought for the meaning. Then behold, there stood before me as the appearance of a man, and I heard a man's voice between the banks of Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, Understand, O son of man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. Now you notice he's saying at the time of the end. Now, and the time of the end is talking about the time of the end of the goat's reign or rule over the earth. But it's also talking about at the latter day, our time, the end. It means both. At the time of the end shall be the vision. Now as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep on my face toward the ground, but he touched me and set me upright. And he said, Behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end. Last end of the indignation. For at the time appointed the end shall be. The end of this empire and the end of the age. It's a dual prophecy. The ram which thou sawest, having two horns, are the kings of Media and Persia, the Medo-Persians, because they had a co-regent, co-regents. And it says, and the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king, Alexander the Great. Now that being broken, whereas four stood up for it, 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. And I've talked about this before, about the 4 generals that rose up, because whenever Alexander the Great was on his deathbed, one of his advisors came to him and said, who do you want to take your place? And he said, let the strong, whoever's strongest. So he had 4 top generals that ruled over 4 regions of the Greek Empire. And so, of course, they rose up to see who was going to dominate. Well, of course, they split up, and you had the Greco-Macedonian wars and all that stuff trying to determine who's going to actually rule and reign over the combined kingdom, and that never came to pass. I mean, they tried. They fought a lot of wars, the Peloponnesian wars and the Hellenic wars and all that stuff. it says, and they shall stand up but not his power. In other words, they did not control the whole kingdom, so they didn't have the same amount of power as Alexander the Great had. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand, Antiochus Epiphanes. And he was the ruler over the Seleucid Empire. And but this is toward the end of the Greeks. Their rule and dominion. The Romans now are starting to come up, and won't be long before the Romans have already done. They probably by this time have already done conquered the. I think it's Cassida, or something like that. That was in control of the Greek Isles and that area, and then you had another one that was ruling over Macedonia, and then Ptolemy over in Egypt, and then Seleucid there in the Middle East and Turkey and all. Well, I think that by this time that the Romans had done conquered a couple of those other ones, and the only ones that really was still standing was the Seleucids and Ptolemy. So this guy fierce countenance, and if you look at Trump, when he's got a fierce countenance, man, when he's really looking mad or mean, like that mug shot that they took of him down there in Georgia or whatever, and that was all, I believe, for show. And his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. And of course, this was during the what led to the Maccabean revolt. Judas Maccabean and all them that revolted finally said enough. We're not. You're not pushing us any further. We're done. And they rebelled against the Seleucids, and they actually defeated them and ran them out of the Levant, out of the area of Israel. But there was a lot of people that because it says that he destroys the holy people, and they did. They killed a lot of the Hebrew people, and of course, craft causes craft to prosper in his hand. In other words, manufacture, making things, doing, creating things, to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. And of course, when you read in Revelation, it says that he will magnify himself and will, speak, really blasphemous words against the Most High and his anointed, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. And it says that a stone cut without hand, when you read on in Daniel chapter 2, a stone without hand comes down and it crushes the feet of the statue that Nebuchadnezzar had his vision of, and it destroys the whole statue. A stone cut, well, that stone is the Messiah, cut without hands. And here it's saying, but he shall be broken without hands. So that's telling you, yeah, Antiochus, he was cut off. I think it was like within 7 years of him declaring, and where it's talking about here, he shall magnify himself in his heart. He named himself Epiphanes, which means, I'm a god, basically. Or elevating, I'm elevating myself up to being a god. And because, his name, I think he was Antiochus the Fourth. And so he was the last, of the great rulers of the Seleucid Empire. And and so he shall be broken without hand. So he, I think it was like 7 years after he committed the abomination that causes desolation, that desolated the temple, where he sacrificed a pig and he sprinkled the blood all over the altar, and then he set up a statue of Saturn or Zeus or somebody there in the Holy of Holies. Well, the Messiah, says, when you see the abomination that causes desolation, now, this had already happened by the time of Christ. It was in like 270 BC, or 200 BC, 170 BC, somewhere along in there when this took place. So, he done this. So Christ is telling his disciples, when you see the abomination that causeth desolation as spoken of by Daniel. So now he's telling you there that this is something that's going to happen in the future. Now these people, these preterists, the ones that believe all of the stuff in Revelation and all the prophecies and all were fulfilled with the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. But what they fail to recognize is, and I've talked about this before too, is that when Titus, because initially it was, because the Hebrew people were in revolt against Rome, all right, and so the emperor, and I think at that time, I'm not sure if Nero was I think Nero was the king or the emperor at that time. And of course, of all the intrigue, he ended up dying, but he had sent Vespasian, which was his top general, and he commanded like 4 legions. I think the 9th, the 11th, 13th, and 15th legions. And he told them to go and put down the rebellion in the Levant. And so they went there and they were gathering there and they were fighting some, but they really hadn't the main brunt of their push to subdue the land of Israel had not begun yet. Well, they had gotten a decree from Nero for them there was something that they were commanded that he wanted him to do, and he wouldn't do it. Vespasian refused to do it. And I think it had to do with the temple. But so Nero had put out a decree to kill Vespasian. Well, in the meantime, of course, it took months for correspondence or a courier to get a letter from Rome over there to where they were at there in Israel, to one of these other generals that were under Vespasian, or one of their assassins or whatever that they had planted there, because they planted assassins within those legions to kill leaders, their leaders, if they got a message from the emperor. That's just the way that they worked. And so Nero died, and Rome was in a turmoil. And of course, Vespasian heard about it. And so he left Israel and left the command to his son Titus. And he went back to Rome and ended up being made emperor. And so Titus is the one that actually ended up destroying the temple there in Jerusalem and destroying the walls and all that stuff. Basically leveling the place. Well, they wanted to capture the temple. They wanted to capture it, and because the walls in there, the cedar wood and all that stuff was plated with gold, sheets of gold. And there was all kinds of gold implements and stuff that were used in the ritual when they sacrificed. They were bowls and they were, spoons and different kinds of implements and stuff that was used that were gold. And so, they wanted to capture that, intact. But they used, trebuchets or siege engines and stuff with catapults and stuff on them, and a lot of times they would lob big balls of tar and they'd set it on fire, and they would lob these in there. Well, they lobbed them in there, and the temple caught on fire, because they were sieging Jerusalem, and Jerusalem was a walled city, so they had laid siege to it. And of course, naturally, they were trying not to destroy the temple, but in the heat of battle and stuff, you're just you're lobbing these catapults, you're lobbing these balls of this tar or whatever that's on fire. You're lobbing it in there. Well, one of them, happened to go into the temple, and it caught that wood on fire. And the temple, cedar wood, that stuff burns, just like pine or anything else. It burns, man. And so it caught on fire and burned, and the building, began to collapse. Because stone and all will start cracking if it gets hot, and then when it starts cooling down, it'll start fracturing and stuff, and so it started collapsing. And by the time it was all said and done, and they finally got control of Jerusalem, the temple had already been destroyed. So they had to go in there, and they actually had to remove the stone off of it and everything, and go in there and dig the gold and all out of the cracks and in the seams in the floors and stuff like that. But they were not able to commit the abomination that causes desolation, because the temple was not there. Because he says that when you see the abomination that causes desolation in the holy place, in the Holy of Holies or whatever, then, and of course, I think that, and I may be wrong, I don't really believe they're going to rebuild the temple. I think they're going to have a tabernacle or something like they did back whenever they was in their wanderings through the wilderness before they built the temple, the first temple. That they're going to have something like that to start with. And but it will have a Holy of Holies in it, because the tabernacle did. It had the enclosure that the holy place and the Holy of Holies was in, and then you had a big tent, and it was a dome-like tent that was over the whole thing. And this tent was huge. It could hold probably 150, 200,000 people. It's not like what people imagine in the pictures that people's tried to come up with. There's an engineer that came up with he went totally off of, because every time anybody tries to duplicate and make a representation of the temple and the tabernacle, or the tabernacle and the tent and all, they have to use other things. Well, the dimensions and the things that they were supposed to use, Moses had specific. He was specifically given the buttons and the hoops and the different things, the panels, the cloth panels and the animal skins and all that kind of stuff was, he gave them all of it. And there was an engineer that he took and went and gathered up every bit of this, everything that it lays out in there that you have to build it. And he built one, and it wasn't like what they show you the representation of it is. It was a dome. And there was the tabernacle was in here, which is a small rectangular enclosure. But then it had a great big huge tent over it. And because, the people had to bring animals there to sacrifice, and so they would gather there to do this. And so I think that that's kind of a similar scenario as to what we're going to see, because I just don't really think it's a rebuilt temple. I think that would be a massive undertaking. And they're going to want to, whenever they reinstitute the sacrifices, they're going to want to do this quick. They're not going to want to wait while they, it took 20 some years for the Solomon's temple to be built. And it took over 20 years for Nehemiah and Ezra to rebuild the temple of Solomon that was destroyed. Or, it wasn't completely destroyed, I don't guess. I mean, there was still portions of it there, but it was pretty well damaged. And it took them over 20 years. So, and they were funded and all by Cyrus. I mean, he gave them the money to do it. And so, I just don't think that's going to be the case. I think they're going to have a tabernacle, and that whenever this beast power comes down in there, because they're going to be attacked, by a southern kingdom. I think it's an alliance, a Muslim alliance that will come up against Jerusalem, and the northern powers will come down and defeat that southern army, and they will take control of Jerusalem. And then that's whenever he ceases the oblations, the daily sacrifices. And that's when he's going to put the abomination that causes desolation, the image of the beast, there in the holy place. And he's going to set himself up as the ruler of the world, the emperor or whatever, going to be crowned. And we see that in Revelation chapter 6. When the first seal is open, it says there's this rider on a white horse, who's wearing a crown and carrying a bow, and which is the same thing he's talking about here. How he shall, and by peace he shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes. But and it says in the vision of the evening and the morning, which was told is true. Wherefore shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days. And I, Daniel, fainted and was sick certain days. Afterward I rose up and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. Nobody understood it. And he's and he was told, basically he says, shut up thy vision, for it shall be for many days. And of course it was, because this is around, I would say this was, during the time when he had this vision here. And the king at this time was probably Belteshazzar was the king. They, he's talking about, and of course it could have been during the time of Darius and what's his name, Cyrus, but I think it's right there around the time whenever that had happened. So they hadn't left this, but it's toward the end. This is toward the end of their captivity there in Babylon. And so they had went into captivity. I think it was in like 529 BC, 539, 529, somewhere along in there. So 70 years below that would have been somewhere around, I guess, 460 BC. Whenever he had gotten this here. So from then until the time that the end of the Medo-Persian Empire came to an end, would have been, or the Greek Empire, when it came to an end, that would have been probably 300 years or more. because I don't think it was until around maybe 190 BC or something when the Romans really kind of started coming up. But so you would have had, it'd been a pretty good ways off from Daniel till the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. So it was, again, it says, for it shall be for many days. So it was a right good while. It was over 300 years until the end of the reign of Antiochus Epiphanes, and basically the end of the Greek Empire and the rise of the terrible beast, the beast of iron. But also, and I've talked about this, how only in recent years, I mean, and it's not to say that all throughout time, going back to Christ and all, that there haven't been individual people that the whole of Scripture has been revealed to them, and they had the understanding of it so that they could continue to carry it forward. But for the most part, to the majority or the masses, this has all been a mystery. The book of Daniel and the book of Revelation, that people really couldn't understand. And it was told, to Daniel to seal up this book to the time of the end, and the same with Revelation. John was told to seal up the book, that, until the times of the end, and then it would be, revealed. And so now the revelation of it, the revealing of it is coming out. And there's been people, going back, on back a ways now, that were coming out talking about this and telling about what they believed that it meant. And it was pretty much on what most of the true Bible believer, first century Christians believe. And so, that it was meant to be opened up and revealed here in the latter days. And like I say, when it comes to, these preterists trying to say that all of that stuff was fulfilled there at the destruction of Jerusalem, that's not true. Because, I just read there from Matthew, about, and it says in the last days, he said, when he told his disciples, here in Mark 13, he says the same thing. Take heed. He says, they say to him, tell us when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign when all these things shall be fulfilled? And Jesus answering them began to say, take heed lest any man deceive you, for many shall come in my name. And we shall hear of wars and rumors of war. Of course, they heard of wars and rumors of wars back then too, just like we do today. But as you go on through this, you'll find that it gets on into a lot of stuff that really just never happened. Like, and the stars of heaven shall fall, and the powers that are in heaven shall be shaken. Well, I don't know of anywhere that it says that happened. And you would think that that John, because he was, the book of Revelation was written around 90 A.D., so he would have known about the fall of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple and all that. But they were still people living there. It wasn't like they had been driven out. But they had I think it was over like 1 million people died, and I think Flavius Josephus records this stuff in his Antiquities of the Jews and the Jewish Wars. He talks about how many people were killed and all that stuff there in Jerusalem. But Christ was talking about, in here also, he tells them, when you see these things begin to come to pass, you flee from Jerusalem. You flee to the mountains and the hills and all. And so all the first century Christians that were true believers in Christ and in the disciples and all, whenever these things started happening, they fled. So they were spared. They survived it, but there was a lot of, the non-believing Jews that wasn't. And so, and one of the other things like there with Trump is if you look at his connections, like his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, he's Jewish. And his wife, she's converted to Judaism. And so, and the ties to Zionism. And and I've been talking about that frequently here lately because of what's going on over there in Israel right now. With Hamas and all that. And if you listen to the rhetoric of the jihadists, the Hezbollah and the Hamas and Islamic Jihad and all them, they always say the Zionist. We're going to drive out the Zionist. Well, and I've explained that. When you look at the ties of Zionism and how Zionism, the movement of Zionism, started. It started back in the 1800s. And I think it was the Ashkenaz. I've said that. The Ashkenazis, they call them the Ashkenazi Jews. Well, they're not Jews. The Jews, I think it is back in Hosea, the first time that the word Jew was used to, as a derogatory term for the people of the tribe of Judah. All right, so, it's not like something that they had always called them. It was relatively probably 100 years or so before Christ when they started calling them Jews. But they're the Jews. The Jews are the people from the tribe of Judah, which is of the bloodline of Shem. Okay, because Abraham was from the bloodline of Shem, and all of his descendants are going to be from that same bloodline. But the Ashkenaz that call themselves Jews, but are not, they're of the synagogue of Satan. That's what Christ was talking about when he said that. He was because they were already over there. They were already coming in over there, and probably were already infiltrated into the temple and all that stuff through Herod, the Herodians. Herod, Herod was not a Hebrew. He was an Edomite, descendant of Esau. So, and that's why, it is important to really study this stuff and to kind of go look at your backgrounds on it and all, because if you do, because then you begin to understand why he would make certain statements and stuff that people's like, well, what does he mean by that? They are those who say that they're Jews, but they are not. They are of the synagogue of Satan. What does that really mean? Well, if you go all the way back into Genesis, back there, before the Table of Nations, and after the flood, whenever Ham had looked upon his father's nakedness, and of course most people believe that he, was looking at his mother, because it uses that terminology because of, you become one flesh whenever you're married. So if he's looking upon his father's nakedness, so he's, done something homosexual or whatever. No, I don't think that's what it was. I think he just was, going to do something with his mother. But anyway, he was cursed on account of it, but he says, cursed is Canaan, Ham's son. And if you read on, it says, Ham shall be a servant in the tent, to Shem, and he will be a servant to Japheth, and Japheth shall dwell in the tents of Shem. So, to me, that's exactly what that's implying, is that at some point, these descendants of Japheth, the Ashkenaz, are descended from Japheth. And they were over there in the area of eastern Turkey and the Caucasus, in that area over there is where they, settled after they began to, spread out. the sons of Japheth, and that's where the Ashkenaz, they were the Scythians, known as or Scythians, depending on how you say it. But, and this is a little known fact about some Jews, so-called Jews, that Hitler sent 500 of them, is my understanding, that he sent to Israel. Now, why would Hitler send these 500 Jews to Israel when he's over here trying to annihilate the Jews? They were not true Jews. They were Ashkenaz. And because he was trying to, and the reason, people will say, well, why are they so determined to destroy the Jewish people? Why is the world so determined to destroy them? Well, it's real simple. Because Christ said, I will not return until they say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. So if you destroy those people, there will not be any to say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, and he won't return. I mean, it's just that simple. So that's the idea. I mean, but he also, there where you read in Revelations where it says that the dragon was wroth with the woman, and he sent a flood out to kill the remnant of her seed. Talking about the descendants of the woman that delivered the son, delivered the child, the Christ child. So he sends out this flood, and it's talking about the believers that he sent, and the waters represents people that an army or whatever that he's sending out to go out after the remnant of her seed. The Hebrew people. And as I've said before, it's not just the Jews. The true Jews, the ones who are descended from Judah, and the Benjamites and the Levites, because they're all three represented over there in Israel. But you can there's a faction there of true Hebrews that they got no use for the Zionists. Because the Zionists are the Rothschilds and that bunch. And I mean, when you try to find their history and stuff, man, I mean, it doesn't go along with the history of the Hebrew people. And that's the reason why he will also come after the saints. Because a lot of the saints are going to be people that are from the other tribes, the other 10 tribes that got dispersed. And there'll be Gentiles too. I mean, it's not just, there'll be Gentiles saved too. But they are the descendants of those tribes that went into captivity in Assyria that will, that they're going to be, that they will repent, because that's what all this is about, is to bring, to save a remnant of them people, because he promised that he would. He promised to Abraham that he would, that he would save some of all of them. And he's going to keep his promises, but not before they go through a lot of suffering, because of the same thing that the house of Israel did over there, worshiping idols, sacrificing their children, and everything else, adultery, fornication, all your just common sins. But their biggest sin was they played the harlot. They were worshiping false gods. And, to the point where every house had its own little god, little statue, or a little sign, a little star, like the star rim fan, that star you see on the and of course I'll be called anti-Semitic, because I'm talking like this here, but the fact is I'm not anti anybody, but but if you are against the Most High and His anointed, then yeah, you're my enemy. You know, I mean, and that's just the way that it is. And I'm going to stand, for this, and for the author of this, and his anointed or Messiah. I mean, that's what I'm going to stand for. And I'm going to stand for the truth. And of course, that's why they work overtime to try to cover up history, to bury history, to change history, to alter it. And and the scripture tells us they do this. They're going to do this. That they're going to seek to change times and traditions and laws. And they have. I mean, they've been doing it for a long time. This is not a modern phenomenon. This is something that's been covered up and going on for a long time. I mean, like the Vatican over there, their archives and all that stuff. I mean, they have all kinds. I mean, no telling how many books and documents and scrolls and all ancient ones that prove all this, that validate everything in here. But yet, they keep it suppressed. They don't want people to know this truth. And the same thing about who was ruling and where, and like Tartaria, they've covered that up. And the mud floods. And all kinds of other historical things that, you can find it, but you got to really be a scholar. You really got to get out there and do your digging and do some scholarship to find this stuff, because they've done such good. And now, like with the internet, it's like a noose. They going, they're tightening it up to suppress truth. And I mean, I've seen, video footage like Barack Obama talking about, making it so that you could know, that they were intentionally putting so much disinformation and misinformation out that people would not be able to determine what was true and what wasn't true. And and the scriptures tells us that people would be deceiving and being deceived. Because, and that's exactly the idea. And to get people so just distrustful of the media, distrustful of any sources of information, because that's what they want to do. They want to destroy your trust in to where you don't know what to believe. That's why we have to have an anchor. We have to have a foundation that we're attached to. That's why Christ said, the man who builds his house upon the rock, when the storm comes, it's going to be left standing. But the one who just builds his house on sand, it's going to come down with a great fall. And this is our foundation. This is the foundation that we need to build our lives on. And if we do, we've got the truth. We've got it right here. And everything else can be judged from this. So, and you have to pray for discernment. To have your spiritual eyes opened so that you will be able to see the deceptions. That's why Christ, he made it, he emphasized this. That's the first thing he tells his disciples there when they asked him there in Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, the same thing. Take heed, lest no man deceive you. All right, and they're in Mark 13 there, where he said, it says that they which says, for false Christ and false prophets shall rise and shall show signs and wonders to seduce, if it were possible, even the elect. Even the elect. And let's see what it says here in Luke 21. It says, And this is the other side of it here is, it says, let's go back here a little bit. Take heed that ye be not deceived, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and the time draweth near. Go ye not therefore after them. But when ye shall hear of wars and commotions, be not terrified, for these things must first come to pass, but the end is not by and by. And of course, it gives, it goes on to talk about the signs and stuff, earthquakes and all that kind of stuff. It says, then you shall be brought up, put in prison, brought up before kings and rulers. And this stuff did happen to the disciples. These things did. But they're going to happen to us too. All right, it says, settle it therefore in your hearts, not to meditate before what ye shall answer, for I will give you a mouth and wisdom, which all your adversaries shall not be able to gainsay nor resist. And ye shall be betrayed by both parents and brethren and kinfolks and friends, and some of you shall they cause to be put to death. In other words, and I tell people that some of the worst enemies that you will have as a believer will be in your own household. And when it comes down to whether you're going to buy or sell, if you don't take this mark or whatever, if you don't worship on this day, and the proof of it is the putting this chip in your head or in your forehead, in your hand. But it also comes down to what you think and what you do, what you work with your hands, the work of their hands, the thoughts in their minds. But it's also a physical actual thing that they will do to be able to know when you're actually doing the worship, because it'll be just like whenever Nebuchadnezzar, I believe it's in chapter 3 of Daniel, he had a statue made of himself. And at a certain time of day, all musical instruments would start playing, and everybody would have to turn towards where that statue was and bow down and worship it. It's going to be the same way whenever this system is in place, is that you will, a certain time of day, in these smartphones, is going to be the way that they're going to, it's going to just come up on there, and some kind of an announcement, maybe the emergency broadcast system, I don't know. But they're going to come on with an announcement, and this image is going to come up on there, and they're going to know whether you're doing it or not. And in order for you to buy or sell, you have to do this. And the chip in the head or in the hand will be the way that they will differentiate between those who do worship it and those who don't. And unless you have this mark, this chip, that's your sign of, that is the method of enforcement, the way that they will enforce this worship is, if you want to buy or sell, then you've got to do this worship, and this is the way we're going to know, because we're going to control the buying and selling through these chips. We're going to put one in your forehead or one in your hand, and you're going to have that in order to buy or sell. And so the people who refuse, they won't be able to buy or sell because they don't have that identifier that identifies them as being a part of that religious worship system. And you have, and this is the thing that I kind of ponder about. I like to, from time to time, I like to just kind of ponder on or meditate on the things that are going on around us, and just kind of try to put the puzzle together. I'm kind of a big picture kind of guy, I like to know the big picture. But, you know, in order to get the big picture, you got to take a bunch of little pieces and put them together to kind of begin to form this picture. And so I will take, you know, and I've got different sources that I listen to that have been consistently truthful, because that's what I'm going to, you know, base the sources that I get information from on, is their integrity, their honesty, their truthfulness. And does these things actually have, you know, do they actually occur or whatever? And so from listening to different sources, you know, I'll take in bits and pieces and kind of start putting them together. And when you look at the, you know, the World Economic Forum and what their push towards is, you know, you will own nothing and you'll be happy. And, you know, by a certain time, they want to put you know, these biometric chips in people. You know, they openly tell us this. You know, you've all Noah Harari and Klaus Schwab. They talk about this on their when they have their meetings over there in Davos. You know, where all these elitists gather over there and they talk about what they want to do to us. It only applies to us. It doesn't apply to them. And they're the ones that probably have been fomenting, you know, they, like I say, they're all together because in Psalm 2, you know, where it says the kings of the earth and rulers, they take counsel together against the Most High and His anointed. Well, they all in league together, you know, and they do these things to, you know, like what's going on in Ukraine over there. That's all smoke and mirrors, you know, just to draw our attention away, to deplete our money, you know, and to get rid of people, you know. I mean, they're getting rid of a lot of people there, and probably to get rid of, you know, a power that, you know, Ukraine was the largest military outside of Russia, you know, in Europe. And maybe they wanted to get rid of a bunch of their military so that they could get control of everything. But, you know, and Russia, you know, agreed to be the one to do it. But, you know, and all the chaos here and all the debt. So whenever this person comes along, you know, that's going to have the solution, you know, again, create a crisis, watch the reaction, give a solution. You know, you push it right to the, you know, to the point where people are desperate for peace and security. And it says when they say peace and security, sudden destruction cometh upon them. And so, you know, where I was reading there in Revelation 6, you know, about this and it's the same thing that I just read back there in Daniel, here in Revelation 6. This rider on the white horse, because he's going to be crowned, and I think he's going to be crowned by the Pope. You know, it says, and I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard as it were the noise of thunder, and one of the four beasts saying, Come and see. And I saw, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. And then you can also, I think it's back here in, let's see, where was it at? Yeah, here in Revelation chapter 13, and it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations, and all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. And of course, this is the first beast. In the second beast, it says, And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. and he exercises all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein. Now you notice he exercises all the power. So this religious leader is going to have all this power. He's going to crown this person as like the Holy Roman Emperor, and this second beast exercises the power and authority of the first beast. You know, which is the same thing that was going on there with Constantine and, you know, the following emperors. If you look, you know, Charlemagne and Otto II and, you know, all down through there, they were going out and enforcing the edicts and the laws and the demands of the Pope. I mean, that's what they were doing. I mean, even when you get down to the time of Martin Luther and Calvin and all them, and you know, it was I think it was Charles, which was one of the German or the Saxons, you know, they're in Saxony or whatever over there, that he basically was an emperor, you know, Charles II or something like that. You know, he was an emperor there, and you know, they tried to convince him to you know, to come away from the Catholics, but ultimately he wasn't, and there was a lot of war that went on, you know, what they called holy wars, you know, to destroy heretics or whatever. And the same thing with Isabella and what was his name? Ferdinand and Isabella there in Spain during the Inquisitions. They were trying to hold the empire together. They was trying to hold the Holy Roman Empire together and enforce the religious edicts of the Pope. You know, and they tortured people. And you know, when you go and look in Revelation 17, where it talks about this harlot riding this beast, and you know how she, you know, had the blood of the saints. I mean, it's talking about all the martyrs down through history, going back to the time, you know, after Christ. I mean, it was through that system, you know, the pagan Roman system that had been, you know, taken over by the Babylonian system, you know, that became Catholicism or whatever, the religious system. But, you know, and I've talked about that. You know, you can go look at the history of it. It's pretty clear, you know, how this Babylonian or Babel, religion of Babel, worked its way down through these different succeeding empires, and then finally settled there in Rome. And that's, you know, that's its final resting place. And but you know, if you start listening and watching and hearing what he says, and what, you know, I mean, I've seen, you know, like when I go watch some of these YouTube videos of people I watch, and then you go down in the comment section and look at the comments of these people. Some of them, I mean, they want to make him into a king. They want to, you know, they all but are worshiping this guy. Some of them even are. They're making him to be a god or something. And that should tell you something right there. And like I say, I mean, his, you know, even people that, you know, so-called never Trumpers or whatever, man, are coming out now on his side. More and more are coming to his side. And I think that's why all this stuff has, you know, been done orchestrated by the Democrat side or the left-hand side, is to do that. Is to push people over that way to this Savior, this deliverer. You know, and you know, I may be wrong, but I tell you, the way things are adding up, and like I say, go look at those memes. That Dilly Meme Team. They had two different ones. One, he's dressed up as Santa Claus, like Krampus. He looks sort of like Krampus. You go look up an image of Krampus. Not a nice looking fella, I can tell you that. And talking about his naughty list, and all that. That he got these names of all these, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Biden, and on there on his naughty list. I mean, and a lot of symbolism in it, a lot of satanic, Luciferian type symbolism in it. And I mean, so like I say, maybe I'm wrong. I don't want to falsely judge or accuse anybody of anything, but you can tell a tree by the fruit that it bears. And to all these people, he looks like a ram with a lamb, with two horns, but he kind of speaks like a dragon, don't he? He'll invoke the name of Christ, and he'll talk about God and all that, but that don't make you godly, and and that don't make you know this. You can say, look, I got a Bible, but what do you know about it? What have you read of it? What has it had? What impact has it had on your life? And so, I just, with everything that's going on, with these, elections coming, this year, and like I said about how Barack Obama said you got to put all this misinformation and disinformation out there to where people become so confused they don't know what to believe, and that's exactly what's happening. So that tells you that they are doing this. There's no doubt that they are deliberately doing it. They're deliberately letting all these people across the border. They're deliberately destroying the economy. They're deliberately destroying farms and poisoning everything with the chemtrailing and all that stuff. With and more people, are becoming aware of it. I mean, the veil is being lowered on a lot of people's eyes, that they are beginning to actually see this stuff, and like what the and a lot of people say, man, well, we need to start growing a garden and having our own food. Well, just yesterday there's an Amish farmer up there in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, that they raided. He had a private club that he supplied organic food, and dairy and beef and stuff like that to about 4,000 people. Some of them come from 2 or 3 hours away to get it, because of the quality of it. And they've done this to him a couple years ago. They keep coming after this guy because they want to control all the food, the production of food, and they want to make it illegal for you to grow your own food and to reuse seeds. It's illegal. Because they want you to be captive to, if you're a farmer or something, they want you to be captive to the Monsantos and the Pioneers and different ones like that produce these biogenetically engineered food seeds, grain and all that kind of stuff, beets and, the commodity kind of stuff. They want you to be, you're going to buy it from them, and you're going to use this, genetically modified stuff. And a lot of that is so that they can dump all this stuff that they're dumping in the air. There was a guy that was an organic farm. I think they were in Utah or somewhere. Maybe they might have been in California, but they had, nice little organic garden. They had a produce stand and all where they sold their produce and all that stuff. And they had pictures of, it was thriving. I mean, it was just jumping, man. Really, they really had a really nice, they knew what they were doing. And the next day they come out there and everything was dying. It was dying. And, they're using drones with herbicides like, the glyphosate. They're going around spraying these organic gardens and stuff like that, in the middle of the night, and killing them. Because the only, the way that you can control the masses of people is to control them through food. I mean, whoever controls the food controls the people. I mean, it's just that simple. It's just like, what good is money? What good is anything if you don't have no food? What good, and that's why the third horseman there in Revelation 6 is a black horse with a guy riding around. He's got a set of balances in his hand, and he's saying, a measure of wheat for a penny, 3 measures of barley for a penny, or a denarius. A denarius was a monetary amount that was, during the Roman times. A denarius was what a man, the average working person, would work all day long for 1 denarius. And so 1 denarius, back in, the times of Christ and after, 1 denarius would get you enough wheat to make a couple of loaves of bread, which would be enough to feed you. Not your family and nothing else, just to feed you. So that is the implication here. That it's going to get to the point where a person will work all day long. And I'm talking about a working person. I'm not talking about the elite. They're going to, because it says, hurt not the oil and the wine. So that's an allusion to the wealthy. They're going to have theirs. But no, it's, the working class and the poor will have to work all day long to earn enough to feed themselves. And what they're going to be feeding you is all going to be biogenetically engineered or lab grown. I mean, that's the push, for this lab grown stuff that they call meat that isn't. And this, you better really look at your labeling. They're putting this cricket flour. I'm talking about, chirping, like the chirping crickets, that you fish with and stuff. They're taking, they got places where they raise, billions of them, and they're making them into flour, and they're putting it in everything. They're beginning to put it into everything. And the problem one of the main problems with it is that it's got chitin in it, and chitin is terrible for your stomach, your digestive system. And so they're gonna trying to force this stuff on everybody. And and another thing, you can go buy 5 pounds of pork cheaper than you can buy 1 pound of beef. And it talks about that too, about how they'll be hiding in the, out in the garden, behind the tree, eating swine and the mouse. I mean, and you got people today. I mean, there's certain countries where they will eat anything. I mean, mice, rats, you name it, bats, snakes. Everything that the Bible says is an abomination for us to eat. You can go look at, when Noah and we come through the flood, he was told to carry 7 of each of the clean animals. And then there in Leviticus, it lays it out what those clean animals are for us to eat. The ruminant animals, like deer, cows, sheep, goats, elk, antelope, stuff like that. You can eat those. And, but it's funny that the one meat that is really, considered an abomination, that's pork. There's an abundance of it. They want everybody to eat that stuff. And because they know it's an abomination. I mean, these people are under the influence of demonic and satanic powers. So, these secret societies and all, they all know this. It's just like the flat earth argument. They know that the earth is flat and unmoving, and it has a dome over it called a firmament, and they put it out in our face. And there's declassified military documents where whenever they're designing an aircraft or designing a missile, you have to design these things to operate in the environment in which they're actually going to operate in, the way that it really is, not the way that you say or fantasize that it is. And and it specifically says in these documents, this is, assuming a flat, non-rotating Earth. They're telling you. They know it. They know that it is, and they have to design a rocket or aircraft to perform and to do what it's supposed to do based on that fact. Otherwise, they'd say based on a globe. And, you got people that will make the argument, well, they just do that to simplify the math. Well, that's malarkey, man, because these people that are building these things are physicists. They're scientists. They're mathematicians. This is what they do. I mean, why are you paying these people these big bucks if they're not going to do the math that is based off of the way things really are? And in all of that, I've mentioned, the group Korn's got their video called Coming Undone. You can go, I wouldn't listen to the lyrics, but you can go look at the video. Not only that, the Truman Show. And one of them marbles with the flash in it where he's running and he goes through the firmament wall. Thor's hammer. You can go look this up. Don't take my word for it. I like you folks to do your own homework, do your own research. Don't take my word for it. Go look up Operation Dominic and Operation Fishbowl. This was after they went to Antarctica. Antarctica, they went down there, and when they come back, they started trying to blow a hole in the firmament, and they tried to start drilling holes to see how deep it went. United States and Russia. Russia done that borehole over there. They went 8 miles. They went down 8 miles, and they couldn't go no further. That was as deep as they could go. And the scripture tells us, says, if you can determine the height of the firmament or the depths of the foundations of the earth, I will forsake Israel forever. So they were trying to find out how far down it was to the bottom where the foundation is. And they were trying to find out the height of the firmament. And they still don't know how high it really is. But in those two, Operation Dominic, which the word Dominic translated means of the Lord. Fishbowl of the Lord. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. And what did they use? They used Thor Atlas missiles. Thor. And they started out with like a 1.5 megaton nuclear bomb. and went all the way up to the biggest ones they had, which was 14 megatons. And it didn't even scratch it. But they tried. They tried for 2 years. So, you know, the deception, and I believe that's a part of the great delusion that people are given over to, is the heliocentric cosmology, that they are aliens, because they're going to get kicked back down here. Satan and the fallen ones, you know, the third of the stars of heaven will be cast back down here on the earth, and they come down here with great wrath. They ain't coming down here happy, because they're kicked out of the second heaven, and their freedom of movement is going to be stopped. But you know, and this is when Michael stands. That's when the restrainer is removed. Michael is the restrainer that restrains Satan and the fallen ones. But it says that he stands. When he stands and they're cast back down here, he's going to remove the restraint. They're going to be allowed to do whatever they want. And that's, you know, during the time of the Great Tribulation. The second half of the 70th week of Daniel. And so I advise you, you know, be careful. Take heed. Don't let nobody deceive you. Especially, you know, the political entities. You know, you got to listen to what these people say. You know, and I mean, they are normally, they're going to tell you what they're going to do. And, you know, of course, a lot of stuff they do it in the middle of the night and all that, you know, and they put these great big 5,000 page bills through the Congress that nobody ever reads. They're supposed to do it one bill at a time, and, you know, to where they can all read it and see what's in it. But they don't do that anymore. Now they just package all the, you know, everybody puts something in there. And they pass it through there, never looking through there what it says. And a lot of times, you know, they're passing laws and stuff that are not beneficial to us. You know, like these, you know, trying to harass people like that Amish farmer, taking away your right to, you know, to reuse your own seeds. I mean, you know, stuff like that. I mean, in Barack Obama, he made a list of things that if you did this, you know, you might be a terrorist. You could be considered a terrorist. Saving seeds, canning your own food, raising a garden, raising animals. I mean, you know, guns, having guns, having one of these. And when you listen to the rhetoric of people like Joe Biden up there saying, you know, the MAGA crowd, you know, they're you know, they want to destroy democracy, and America is not a democracy. America is a constitutional republic, a representative form of government. You know, George Washington actually warned people about the Democrats and their democracy. But you see, they don't teach civics in school. They don't teach any of that stuff. They don't want our children to know all this stuff, you know, about the way that the country was founded and on the, you know, the principles and you know, going back beyond 1776. I'm talking about going back to the Puritans and all that. They want to hide that stuff. The very thing I just was talking about a while ago about covering it up, hiding it, doing away with it, keeping people ignorant. And that's why, you know, the scripture says, my people perish for lack of knowledge. And that's where we're coming to. That's where we're at. And it's going to be the difference between surviving and perishing. It may come down to that, you know, if you don't know how. You know, I mean, know how to, you know, preserve some food and how to grow a little bit of food and hunt and fish and, you know, how to make, you know, build a fire and, you know, the kind of survival skills that our grandparents and great grandparents did. Living off the land, living, you know, knowing how to go out and find stuff that you could eat and harvest that grows wild, you know, dandelions, mullein, dock, you know, morel mushrooms, Hen and Roosters, Chaka. I mean, and a whole lot of other, wild lettuce. I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff that's right there, and you probably in your yard that you can eat. So and you can eat grasshoppers. You can eat locust. I mean, read about John the Baptist. He lived off of wild honey and locust. That's the other thing, honey. I mean, you can, you might have to get out and look around in the woods and all that, but you might be fortunate enough to run up on a beehive that you can harvest some honey out of. And, honey is incredibly energy dense and nutrient dense. Get some honey and store it up, and it'll store forever. Honey won't spoil. As long as you don't put no metal spoons and stuff like that in it. Don't ever use metal in it. Use, a wooden spoon or just pour it out, on whatever you're going to put it on or whatever. But, that's get you, there's plenty of books, and I'm talking about books. I'm not talking about a smartphone or a computer. I'm talking about actual physical books that you can get on, wild plants and stuff that you can eat. And I'm telling you this because, people don't believe it. I've been telling people for years now that there's coming famine. And it ain't just a famine. There's a famine of food and a famine of the word. Because, it's going to be more and more under attack. Because if this right here word, the King James is contrary to the Douay-Rheims and to the Catholics and to, their all-inclusive religion. All-inclusive except for first century Bible-believing Christians or people of the way. And if you look through that, down through the history since the first century, it's been the true Bible-believing Christians that have been under attack. I mean, non-stop, continuous. And it's the Catholics that have done it. And then they, helped to establish Islam. And they used them as well to go and hunt down and kill first century Christians. This is a matter of historical fact. And so, because it, they had their, the Crusades and stuff like that, with the Knights Templar and all that and they were fighting over Jerusalem, with the caliphates and stuff. But, again, a lot of that is all to deceive you about how they are really all in league together. And so with that, I've kind of just went on a sort of a general tirade here, I guess, but a lot of stuff to think about, a lot of stuff to meditate on. And as I always say, I want you to be good Bereans. I want you to be, not just hearers of the words, but doers of it. I want you to study. I want you to, and you can go outside of the Bible. Be careful now, about what you read outside of the Bible, but, there's certain stuff you probably ought to stay away from. But I want you to be well-rounded. I want you to know some history. I want you to know, so that whenever you see certain things in there, like I said, where he talks about the those who say that they are Jews and are not. Well, unless you kind of know some of the other history about these different peoples, that, study about the peoples that descended from Noah and his 3 sons, who they became, where they lived. There are movements in time. The empires that rose and the empires that went down, and you can see. I mean, when you go looking at this stuff, you can, and it will actually strengthen your belief, because when you begin to look at, say, the history of the Medes and the Persians, and you realize that the things that happened in secular historical writings and stuff, match up with exactly what Daniel prophesied was going to happen. And the way that we can know, for, because people say, oh, Daniel was written, after these things happened, after the Greeks and after but when you go again, you can look at a Septuagint translation of the Hebrews, the Hebrew Masoretic text, which I think they did it in like 270 BC, which was long before the fall of the Greeks. I mean, it was a long time before the fall of the Greeks. And you look at that translation into the Greek, because the Septuagint is a Greek translation of the Hebrew Masoretic text. And it was done by 70 Hebrew scholars that came from Israel. And one of the reasons why Ptolemy, I think it was Ptolemy the Second, is the one that commissioned it. The reason he did was because, for one, he wanted to put it in, the library at Alexandria. I mean, he was proud of his library. And they had, at the time, it was the largest library and repository of knowledge in the ancient world. They had millions of scrolls and books. But not only that, there was a whole lot of Hebrew people living there in Egypt. And so they wanted the scriptures, but they didn't speak Hebrew anymore. They spoke Greek. And so they wanted a copy of their scriptures, their Hebrew scriptures, in Greek. So, they came and they translated it, and it has a copy of the book of Daniel in it. So, so it verifies Daniel existed before these things took place, like Antiochus Epiphanes and all. And so, it just does you good if you well round yourself out. That's why, I believe that 2 Timothy is so important, 2:15. Study to make thyself approved a workman unto Elohim, who need not be ashamed, rightly dividing the truth, word of truth. And there's a word that is mistranslated in, I believe it's in Acts chapter 10, it's the word Easter. The word there should be Passover. But there's one good thing about that it dates. It actually gives you the time that Passover really happened. Passover was in March, because the pagans celebrated Easter, and it was in that same period of time, because that's when you have the spring equinox. And they celebrated Easter on the spring equinox, which is in March. So it validates it. And March is the first month of the year for the Jews. And really for us too. And so you can use it as a way, because he says that the disciples were coming to the end of the days of unleavened bread. And it was Easter. And no, it was Passover, because Passover is on the 14th. Because if you go back to Leviticus 23, it lays out, it says you will keep the Passover on the 14th day of the first month. And on the 15th day is the beginning of the days of unleavened bread. The first day shall be a high day or a Sabbath unto you. You shall do no servile work. And then it goes on down to the seventh day, and the seventh day is a high day. It is a Sabbath unto you. You shall do no servile work in that day. It was a Sabbath. So, if that's the case, that gives you your time. That tells you what the first day of the first month of the year is, and you can do your keeping of the feast based off of that. And the majority of those feasts are in the seventh month, which is in September. The Feast of Trumpets, Atonement, the Feast of Tabernacles, and the Sukkot, the Feast of Booths, are in that month. So, there's no reason why, if you're a true believer, that you shouldn't want to and try to keep those days, those feasts, and because they are an everlasting memorial, an everlasting covenant. And people say, well, that's for the Jews, the Hebrew people. It's not for us. Oh yeah, it is. Because whenever we are born again into Christ, we're grafted in. We become a part of Israel. We become a part of Israel, spiritual Israel. And that stuff was an everlasting covenant. Just like the Sabbath is an everlasting covenant. So it's not something that was just for that particular time period and then it's done because the Levitical system and its 613 ceremonial laws are done away with. No, it's not. Those things were an eternal covenant, the everlasting covenant, and so they do not go away. And so just kind of wanted to bring that out. How you can know these dates by things that Satan tries to slip in to our scriptures, little things here and there, and I think God allowed it. But it's actually good because it actually helps you to know that this is when, because they keep their, that's why Easter falls in the same period of time as the Passover, but Christians have been lulled into believing that Easter is what they're supposed to keep instead of Passover. They've been deceived. But so we can date, we can know that this is the first month of the year. This is when, the 14th day of that first month, we should be keeping Passover. And Christ told us to keep Passover. Whenever he was with his disciples, when he had his last meal with them, he said, do this in remembrance of me. And so we should honor him in that way. But anyway, folks, I love you. I thank you for watching the videos. I hope that they stimulate your mind into doing what I just said, studying. Trying to seek out truth and knowledge. And you can find truth in, this is your foundation of truth. If it's anything that does not go along with the truth that's in this, then you discard it. But if it goes along with this and it doesn't contradict it, then there's nothing wrong with it. And it's just like, with the Book of Enoch and Jubilees, Jasher and all them, they unless there's something in there that contradicts this, then there's nothing wrong with reading those and actually getting a greater understanding about the way things were. And so with that, I'm going to call it an evening or a night, and I will see you on the next Shabbat if Yahweh is willing.